Hello everyone. The topic of my presentation today is tonal adaptation of disyllabic letter character pattern in Mandarin alphabetical words. The authors are Professor Ding Hongwei and me, Li Yiling, and I'm also the presenter of our research. Here are the contents of my presentation. I'll follow the steps of introduction, literature review, methods, discussion, conclusion, and references. So first, introduction. What are Mandarin alphabetical words? They are words with Western alphabets in Chinese. For example, we have karaoke, which means karaoke, and also some acronyms, such as WTO, CCTV, or any other words. Their common fact is that they were imported from the Western world to China. And the earliest literature records of Morse in Chinese were at the beginning of the 20th century, the translation of English X-ray to X-射线, X-光线 or X-光. In the following 60 years, those words were gradually incorporated into Chinese dictionary, and the most frequently used dictionary is the Modern Chinese Dictionary. It contains 239 Morse. And here is the literature review. There was no standardization of Morse until Huang and Xue introduced the classification tree on the left side of the slide. We can see that they divided Morse into two categories, the pure alphabet type and the character alphabet type, as I have mentioned in introduction. Then we need to consider the phonetic characteristics of Morse. After those words were imported into China, several questions appeared. Firstly, there is a tonal discrepancy. We know that there are 4 tones in Mandarin Chinese, and every character has a tone. But it's not the case in English, such as the word 'T-恤, which means t-shirt. We don't have a specific tone for the alphabet T, so this is the first question. And the second question is phonemic discrepancy. That is, some phonemes that do not exist in Chinese also appear in Morse, such as K, Q, V, or the multisyllabic letter W. There was no equivalent pronunciation in Mandarin, so scholars developed into two sides. Some insist on making the words localized, while the others want to keep their foreign traits. Therefore, if we want to tackle those problems, first, we need to know the using habits of Morse by Chinese speakers, and we need to know what factors affect the perception or production of Morse by Chinese people. In this case, some scholars suggest that most Chinese people's spoken Morse are influenced by the factors of dialects, and also the tones of other Chinese characters can be another factor. Then we raised our research question. We want to find out whether and how these factors have an influence on the tone choice for English letters by Chinese subjects, and we want to think about from 3 dimensions: the dialectal area of the speaker, the tone of the following syllable in the more, and the familiarity of the speaker with the more. To carry out our experiment, we recruited 45 graduate and undergraduate students from Shanghai Jiaotong University between 20 to 25 years old, 15 from Shanghai, 15 from Guangdong, and 15 from North China. The reason for choosing these 3 areas is that we have done a preliminary research and found that the speakers from the 3 areas have distinct features in English pronunciation. And for the stimuli or the modes for study, we want the alphabet in the form of vowel or consonant plus vowel because they have similar Mandarin equivalents. So we got A, B, D, E, G, K, O, P, R, T. Also, we want to study the alphabets with closed vowels E and U. So we got Q, U, and V. Altogether, 13 alphabets were selected for this experiment. Then we need to choose the Mandarin characters. In order to form a disyllabic letter-character pattern, we selected 12 Mandarin characters and combined them with alphabets. So we have the words like A 盘, B 对. Besides, we want to study the effects of the following tone, so we assigned each alphabet to 4 different tones of Mandarin characters. Like we have A 波, A 盘, A 卡, A 对. Also, to make the experiment more accurate, we repeated each Mandarin tone 3 times for an alphabet, such as A 波, A 金, A 区. The 3 Mandarin characters are all in tone 1. This table shows the altogether 156 modes selected for our experiment. For those words, we designed 3 tasks. The first 2 were carried out by an online questionnaire, and the third one was done in a recording room. In the first task, participants were presented with the modes in a written format and were asked 2 questions. 1. How familiar are you with those words? With a scale from 1, not at all familiar, to 5, extremely familiar. 2. How do you pronounce the following words? By looking at the written words. In the second task, we asked a native male speaker who spoke standard Mandarin to read all the words, and the participants were asked to make their choices by listening to the audio clips of the modes. Finally, in the third task, they were asked to read the words with their own pronunciations. All the modes were presented randomly in the 3 tasks to avoid any anticipation. Here I'd like to play one of the recordings to better explain our experiment.
P 型 D 盘 B 型 O 对 D 对 T 型 U 字 A 鼓 B 盘 A 区 Q 对
So we can actually find that the speaker did have some variations in tonal choices of the alphabets. Actually, this speaker is from northern China, so many of the words in his recording were pronounced in tone 4. Altogether, we have 45 recordings from 45 participants, and we evaluated their tonal choices one by one. Then the sum of choices in all 3 tasks of each letter is presented in this figure. The vertical axis represents the number of selection of a tone by subjects and the tones distinguished by different colors. Generally speaking, we can see that the blue part, that is tone 1, was mostly preferred in all the 13 alphabets, and tone 3 was least preferred, because there is almost no red parts in this figure. In this table, the exact proportions of preferred tonal choices for each letter across the 3 areas were shown. We can see obviously Guangdong speakers prefer tone 1 in all the 13 alphabets, while Northern Chinese speakers prefer tone 4 rather than tone 1, and the Shanghai speakers, they preferred tone 1 as well, but what makes them distinctive is that they also prefer tone 2 a little bit. Also, from the standpoint of the 3 tasks, in each task, tone 1 ranked the first, followed by tone 4 and tone 2, and tone 3 was almost excluded. So basically, the line is in a spoon shape, especially for Guangdong speakers. The variation of 4 tones among the 3 tasks was similar, without statistical difference. Since there is no significant differences among the 3 tasks, we chose Task 3 to study the participants' actual performance. We adopted the multinomial logistic regression, or MLR, for each letter with 3 independent variables, that is, dialectal area, familiarity, and tone of the following syllable. And the table on the left shows a summary of the effects of dialectal area. Guangdong area was taken as a reference. The arrows represent a significant increase or decrease in the odds of a tone category compared to Tone 1. In the first 6 rows, Northern dialect increased the production of Tone 4 significantly. For Shanghai speakers in the letters like B, V, Q, and D, there was increased production of Tone 2, and some of them had a decreased production of Tone 4. We can conclude that the pronunciation of Tone 4 was a special character of Northern dialect, and in detail, the percentage of Tone 4 in production is illustrated in the table on the right. The 6 letters E, D, G, B, P, T exceeded 60% in the fourth tone. In order to explore other factors, we selected the data only from the northern area and run the MLR model again for the letters whose percentage of Tone 4 exceeded 60%, with Tone 4 selected as the reference level. The table shows the result. It's apparent that compared to Tone 4, the changes only occurred in Tone 1, not in Tone 2 or Tone 3. If the following tone was Tone 2, Tone 3, or Tone 4, ratio of Tone 1 was increased significantly for many letters like G, B, P, and T, but decreased for E. Also, in terms of familiarity, the more familiar you are with the word with G, the less possible you will pronounce it in Tone 1. Then we have the discussion part. For this research, we have basically 4 findings. Firstly, in general, Tone 3 is least preferred in this study, echoing the previous study which claimed that Tone 3 is disfavored for the stressed position in initially stressed disyllabic loans. And based on dialects, for most letters, tonal preferences also depend on dialectal areas. For example, Guangdong speakers prefer Tone 1, Northern speakers prefer Tone 4, and Shanghai speakers prefer Tone 1 followed by Tone 2. Thirdly, based on letters, the letters E, D, G, B, P, T, whose Tone 4 production exceeded 60%, all have the Mandarin final E. This high front vowel E is most likely to be adapted and exposed to tonal changes according to special tonal preferences in different dialectal areas. And we also have other factors. First, familiarity with Morse facilitates Tone 4 for Northern speakers, and the tone of the following character also makes it more possible of the combination of Tone 1 plus Tone 4. This is a high offset followed by another high onset, so the pronunciation can be smooth. But other phonological rules may also contribute to this result. For example, normally a Northern Chinese speaker will pronounce 闭对 as 闭对, but because of the obligatory contour principle, the same tones can't be set together, so they would pronounce it as 闭对 instead. Finally, let's come to the conclusion part. So, this study shows that compared with speakers from southern areas, those from northern areas tend to adapt Morse into Mandarin phonological system by attaching Tone 4 to those letters, especially for those that end with Mandarin final E in pronunciation. Second, since Tone 4 ranks the first in Chinese literature works, to produce the letters in Tone 4 is one sign of adaptation. Therefore, Northern speakers have the tendency to adapt Morse to Mandarin phonological system, while speakers from Guangdong and Shanghai, where their speech prosody does not sound so typical Mandarin, are less likely to do so. Here are the references for our research. That's all for my presentation. If you have any questions about our research, please feel free to contact us. Thanks for your listening.